But there's enough real stuff that we don't completely understand that's a part of our history on this planet that's super weird and not a lot of answers. And that's hopefully what we're going to kind of dig in today.
Well, that's an interesting point, David. It sort of gets brushed aside, and because it doesn't go along with, it doesn't go along with the university narrative. In fact, a lot of the in fact, a lot of the trouble, even at these reawaken tours, a lot of the troubles, not just in archaeology or science, they actually come from those universities. So if it doesn't fit in that box, they kind of dodge it. So with the strange looking skulls, and actually a bunch of stuff about those temples that we can go into, it's not just the heads, it's the temples themselves that you're actually seeing. You're actually almost seeing with everything things were bigger, badder, bolder in the past, including the building techniques that they used. So the stone, in fact, the building techniques are so impressive in the past that people will say, well, aliens must have done it.
Yeah.
You can watch them degrade over time, sometimes in a single wall. You can watch how impressive it was in the past, and then it'll get a little worse, and then it gets to the modern age where it's just like,
And then now, and you see that we went to first time we took a vacation to Italy. We were there with our friends, Steve, Sandy, Rodriguez. We went there, we're there like a week or 10 days, and you're seeing these buildings, that with the ruins and the Colosseum, all this stuff. And, you eat dinner and it's like, well, this wall, is 1200 years old. It's been here. It must be a monastery or something. It's like everything had this history. And we immediately went on a vacation with our, there's some of the skulls we were talking about. Went on a vacation with a family in Orlando, and we were staying at a hotel that, it was brand new. It was within 6 months of being built, but you could tell it had kind of thin sheetrock, and you kind of hear the person on the other side of the wall and this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it was such a stark contrast of the stuff that we're building now. I'm like, I bet they calculated they want this place to last about 30 years. They'll get their monies out, then they're just going to doze it, and it'll be something else or just move on. Like the kind of architecture we have today. And we think we're so amazing now with our iPhones, but we can't come close to replicating some of the things that they've done in the past. And people talk about, is evolution real or not? I'm like, I think if there's an argument to be made, I think we're devolving.
Well, no, it's an excellent point. My wife actually calls even the houses here in America that they're built by toothpicks. She comes from South Africa, and there they use a lot of it. They use a lot of adobe, but even that, when you're looking at the temples, you wonder how the rocks were moved. And
Sure.
Now there are some ideas on that don't require aliens. There's a quality well, particularly if you're looking at, none of the ideas are new, right? So they're it's kind of a rehashing of the days of Nimrod, all of it, or the days of the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and even the concepts of, kind of tried to rub this in some of the videos. Hoping that some of them will listen, because you hear this concept of population reduction over and over and over again, and this actually this is all over those ancient documents, man. Particularly with the god Enlil, he's always, man, it's too crowded up in here. We gotta reduce the population. This is, so you have these two different gods in the ancient world. One is Enki and one is Enlil, and the Enlil one is consistently complaining about the population reduction. And this is all the way back in the days of Nimrod, and the days of Gilgamesh, and the days of, so even the spirit behind it has kind of been saying the same thing the whole time. And you could actually make the case that back, you've got iPads today, but those building structures are still there. And you could easily make the case, I don't know, would Nimrod be impressed with the versions of the same thing today? Or would he be rolling in his grave?
And be like, what have you done? You should be so much better by now. You look at like the Cowboys stadium, the scoreboard they have in the middle in Dallas, Texas. These things are impressive from like a technology standpoint, but from an engineering model, we definitely have gone backwards. And, you look at the size of stones in the pyramids and the angles that they had and the mathematical formulas and the placement of it. Like you would have, it would be hard to replicate that today. And it's hard to tell how they would have done it without satellite imagery and, and a lot of these things. Today's wide open scale. We can go wherever you want. I do want to create just 1 second, just
started with in doing the documentaries. And there are arguments, even from guys that I really like, that really, really smart people. But if no structure can exceed the strength of its grounding, there are a lot of people that I really like that are top speakers in all sorts of fields, and they believe this evolution thing, which is really, I think, what has led to a lot of the darkness that you have in all sorts of fields, including the medicine, including the politics, including it is the survival of the fittest. That's the idea being taught. And many of them would be correct, even in some of their dark stuff, as much as I hate to admit that, if the underpinning of what they believed were true. That we came out of a mud puddle and it kind of goes nowhere, and it is a survival of the fittest. Now, if it goes the other way, David, as what you and I believe, that there is a God and that we're created, this suddenly sort of changes everything. And it also makes the history, it makes the history far more interesting of where we are. And so that's kind of what we've been walking through. And the moment you go you can even see this, guys, in the different museums. Let me give you an example of this. So I used to go around, when I first started doing these films, I would go around to different museums. A lot of times museums are in old train stations and things like this in Kansas City or Chicago or wherever. And they're pretty much always the same thing. It's got some, you'll have a T-Rex in the front entrance. You'll have a Lucy display. You'll have a zillion years ago, this, and this, and you'll walk through, but it's kind of dark and lifeless, and the same thing actually at all of them. And when the creation people began doing their museums, like the Answers in Genesis folks, it's really colorful and full of life. There's a spirit behind it immediately that's different.
Yeah.
And but go ahead, David, if you...
Well, it just, as a person, if you think like you were conceived in love and on purpose and God's got a plan for your life and your parents loved you, or if you were like, let's just say, abandoned and left at a fire station or something, and you hear that story and you could, be adopted, have parents. There's always this thing of like, was I on purpose? This idea. And if you think as humanity, there was never any intentionality behind it. There was never anything good. It was just a random, cause and effect that we're on a spinning ball in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing in an infinity out there. And there was nothing, like it was all an accident. That fundamentally sends you in a different direction than the creation story of intentionality, a scientific purpose, of something greater than you that conceived of you in his mind and then made you on purpose. Like just in its essence, if you took two children and say, you came from nothing and monkeys eventually, evolved, or like you were created by a God that's good. It's like, wow, your whole psyche is totally different. That's going to affect everything, let alone the color scheme and the vibe of a museum. Goliath was a giant. Was there a lot of giants walking around still then? Or was this like, was he just an anomaly? Says he got a bunch of brothers. One of them had 6 fingers. Like these things are fascinating to me. Like as a kid, right. I was like chomping at the bit. Like what about all this other stuff? And then as I learned about like the book of Enoch, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. And Jesus's brother Jude quoted the book of Enoch. Is that all legit? Is that not legit? And why is it, like I was this curious kid that luckily I had enough fire that on my own in private, I kind of kept that going because the mechanism I was surrounded by just squashed all that. It was kind of more like, well, don't cheat, lie, and don't smoke for sure. Don't smoke, never drink, don't do this, and then you'll be fine. It was kind of the main crux of it. And I was like, this is super interesting content here. Like, that we're kind of skipping past.
Well, and I think it's okay. So you have the strongest. So the strongest argument. Okay, so of those two books, the stronger case could be made for Enoch, and a strong case can be made for both of them. I can tell you sort of the pros and the cons. Now, in the book of Enoch's case, Jude quotes it, and the fragments that you have look identical. So what you would have to believe in the case of Enoch is that somebody took that and kind of developed a text around it. I find that really, really implausible, particularly considering the fact that you had full copies of it in Ethiopian Bibles. They just simply never removed it. So, and these were found in like 1776 or thereabouts. That's substantial evidence. And in the book of Yasher's case, the book of Yasher, you don't, okay, so what you have with Yasher, the earliest copy that there is, I think, comes from 1700 or 1600 out of Italy. Now, in Yasher's case, if it were a fabrication, it was an incredibly talented fabricator. But even if it were, it's still based on legends that you already have from other sources, not only including the biblical source. So,
Okay.
and it's kind of an expansion on many of those stories, quite a lot of them, including the Nimrod one, including the expanded parts of Sodom and you can find and Abraham. You can find these in a variety of other sources. So you'd be arguing. So one would be arguing if it were a fabrication, then it were a fabrication based on actual legends that existed. That were. You see my point in this. What I would commonly tell. Now, Bob Enyard, who was a close friend of mine, before he, a lot of people died in this COVID time frame that were real fighters, and one of them was a man named Bob Enyard.
Okay.
And he was a very close friend of mine, and he would argue with me vigorously about these books. And at the time, it made me oftentimes very angry, and now I kind of miss it. But I would always go back to him because he was very solid in the Word of God. He was one of the most clever debaters on creation and evolution, probably the top one in the world. And I'd like to touch on that in just a second. So yeah, that's Bob right there. He was an incredible friend, and he was one of quite a few AM radio show hosts that did not make it through the COVID. And one of the last things he was doing, he actually took wins in Denver courts on the lockdowns. But he spent his life fighting. Some of the best arguments I've used, many of them came from Bob Enyard and work that he had done.
Okay.
In fact, I did one film with him called Jurassic. Now, what his argument would have been is that they're simply outside of the Bible, so you can't use them. Now, I would ask Bob and retort to that. I would say, well, Bob, have you read them? Well, of course, I'm a biblical scholar. I have to know what they say. Well, okay. Well, so the same applies to everybody else, Bob, that if they want to read them, I really think they should. I believe they are genuine. Bob didn't, and his main reason is if it falls outside the text, I'm not going to use it. Now, I would commonly come back to Bob and state a lot of the documents you're using to support what you believe come from actual pagan artifacts, like the Atrahasis tablet or the Sumerian Kings list, a lot of this supportive stuff comes from outside of the Bible. In the case of those books. I, for one, David, I believe that they're real, but I think that they're also, whether one did or didn't, I think they're worthy of reading.
So, would you consider and maybe make a list like what are all these like extra biblical texts, the most, the Book of Jubilee, Yasher, Enoch?
So you have
would that be considered there?
Well, you have a lot of pseudepigrapha works that came particularly out of the Middle Ages, and a lot of these are kind of we get a lot of and what this means is a bogus text that's ascribed to another author, and that's what
Okay.
Bob with So, and the book of Yasher isn't a person's name. Commonly it would mean book of the upright, would be a common definition of what that book's title is. So, and it's kind of a documentary style explanation of events from the Old Testament. In Enoch's case, Enoch is claiming to be from the actual Enoch. And if that's true, then it would be a record that was kept on that boat with Noah. Now, if you read like the books of Adam and Eve from the garden, you can tell a distinct difference. I don't mean to chuckle at that, but I would even recommend doing it, picking up some of the collections that you can buy of these books, Adam and Eve in the garden, and these other kind of things. And I think you're going to immediately see a distinct difference between, for example, Yasher and Enoch and books like Adam and Eve.
Right.
You're going to tell the difference really, really quickly. And there's a spirit behind it that is very much like the spirit that you're reading in, actually in some of the more passionate books of the Bible, like Revelation or the book of Daniel in Enoch's case. I really have felt real strong. I have used Enoch quite a bit in these new films and Yasher. And one of the reasons for that is they're like in this new Exodus one. So Osiris is talked about in the Yasher one. So where does this character Osiris come from? Well, in Yasher, it walks you through it. I mean, he was one of the first kings, and he gets the empire stolen from him, and he gets cut up into bits by another guy that comes in and kind of swindles him out of the empire. So, and then when you read the Egyptian text, and the Egyptian text says, yeah, he was cut up into little bits, and here he is, he's the green god. He's actually the first Soylent Green, because he's the green god of the Egyptians, and the legend they have is he was cut into bits, and he was thrown here, there, and yonder, and that's probably true. And then you would pay taxes to him afterwards. So, but you have a lot of the
so in those books, there's also like there's like the Book of Mary, that comes along later. There's I've not read this or looked at it, but you see like on the Discovery Channel or National, they'll have like there was a book of Judas, there's a book of Thomas. There's like all these things that kind of came around, that we obviously I think in when you hear people speak are not considered even in the remote context of authority or legitimacy or enough meet the criteria of multiple copies found that jive, all that kind of stuff, as like the Book of Enoch. Is that correct?
Also, if you read them, David, so I haven't read the Book of Mary, but I've heard of it, and here's where if you read them, you're gonna with many of them, you're gonna tell a difference immediately.
You can. It's like, oh, this is a different kind of like you said, a heart behind it. You can kind of feel that in the process.
But yet, Bob Inyard's argument would have been to that he didn't want to go outside of what the Bible was, and I would commonly go to him for advice on a lot of things, particularly dealing with creation and evolution, and he would always make the case from what he's got in the text, and I always respected that. So I go a little ways out over here. That's maybe sometimes as far as the leash will go, and he would stay here, and there's something to that, and I would actually advise that to look at all these other texts on the side and have a good time with it. But I will state this, that I would commonly call Bob for advice on things, and he would always stick to what he's got within the pages, and he would be very conservative with it. And I would actually, particularly as I'm getting a little older, I would advise that. He was one of the best debaters.
We have the 66 books of the Bible. And then if you look at this other context, would you look at it maybe similar to like how I'd look at your book or anything else? Like, I'll look at this. If I read something in there that was like, actually God created the world 9 days or something, and you got some evidence why 9 days, I'd be like, well, the Bible says this, I'm probably gonna have to let Trey's idea sit to the side. But this is still interesting reading, but I'm not ever going to contradict or take above the 66 books for the sake of anything additional, but I might be willing to look at it and take that in, because some of those stories add color and enhancement, and like it's a better, more fuller picture of what I already have in the 66 in Genesis specifically. Is that what you would
I
say?
believe the Lord had it. Okay, so the versions of the Bible that we have now, I believe, and people will say it's been messed with and this, that, and the other thing. I think the Lord has had his hand on everything here the whole time, and that those books that are in there are the ones that he, like where Bob would stick, that he wanted you to have. I think there's all sorts of weird stuff that's gone on this planet that, hey, even the pagans are telling the truth about stuff in some respect. It's just a messier version of a story. And in Enoch's case, an example, I would take the view personally. I think it was written by Enoch or close. I mean, I'm sure things have changed through the time, but there's a spirit to it that that I just enjoy. I would not hold it up to the Bible, but I personally, something has jumped out at me about that book. Now, in Yasher's case, again, it's more of a documentary style thing, and it's got a lot of the legend sound to it. So, well, go ahead. It looked like you were thinking about something to state there.
Well, I don't want to take away from Yasher. I want to dig into and have you put some color to the pre-flood world.
Okay.
People probably have an idea, and it's hard to get rid of, what you've seen in a movie or what you've seen on a flannel graph board. If you're, I'm probably dating myself with flannel graph, but Sunday school, images, and some of those things are kind of messed up. I remember pictures of like, there's Noah on the ark, and there's these animals around him, and he's kind of waving like this. And it's like, yeah, who's he waving to? And all the animals are standing around him, and it's good for a kid's book or something. But these ideas, like these were real people building real things in a real world that had its own culture and belief system and history. And everybody always feels like they're at the front car of a long train. Like we're the cutting edge, yeah, that kind of stuff. It's
there,
like, hey,
right there.
How are you doing? There's a lot of versions of that.
That's very close, what you have on the screen, to the actual measurements. And no, I'm just kidding.
That's what they modeled it off for the one in Kentucky. No, not at all. So you look at what did that world look and feel like pre-flood? What was the vegetation like? What was the weather like? What was what were the people like? And I want to really kind of dig into also like just the genetic shenanigans that were taking place with mankind itself, and what did that look like? Like, what was this world like pre-flood? Was it just some guys in bathrobes that looked like the volunteers at your church that were in the Christmas play, walking around and speaking King James? Or was this like, what were their crops like, and their culture like, and their economy like, and the animals, and like what light can you shed on the pre-flood world?
So the first thing I would like to state about that is there's probably nothing in the world that has more evidence for it than the global flood. The evidence of it is literally in the entire surface of the planet. Okay. The strata that you have under the ground, so all of those dead things that are in there are sorted by ecological systems. And on the bottom of the strata, you got big earthworms down there, which are probably your ancient earth level. And your bigger creatures, or actually you find stuff all throughout there. And in the Grand Canyon, you've got a layer that runs through there where you've got these ancient nautiloids. These are basically squid, and they're going in different directions, and about an eighth of them are, kind of vertical. And this means that, if it was a shallow, placid sea, it would, they'd have to have been standing on their head for millions and millions of years. And the world that you, it's bigger, badder, bolder, all of it. Everything that you see in there, and the construction projects that you see coming right after that flood are ones that we largely can't reproduce today, or don't know how to reproduce today. So and they're all over the place. You have all of these temples where the rocks fit together in ways
Yeah.
that are concise, and no one knows if the rocks maybe were liquid and you poured it in to get it to fit that perfectly. And if you cut it that perfectly, that's even more mesmerizing. And then you'll see as time goes by that all of these building projects diminish. And then you were talking about Goliath. You were talking about Goliath earlier. Well, if you rewind time, so Flinders Petrie, he's one of the big heroes of Egyptology. When you look at any of these subjects and you rewind time about 50 years, you're going to find really solid stuff. It's almost like the ancient world moving towards the crumbling nothing wall that we have today, until eventually you're building homes with toothpicks, right?
Right.
So it goes from big and bad and bold to what you've got now. With the same thing in let's say Egyptology. You go backwards to Flinders Petrie, and a lot of the documents he wrote about are going to be, I wrote extensively about we're finding.
What a name, Flinders Petrie. He that sounds like a guy that really had to make something out of his life, because he probably had a rough go of it in middle school.
Well, that might have actually helped him. I'm not kidding that, because the way that man would describe Egyptology is, well, first you need your gun, right? And then you're going to have other guys with guns. Then you're going to need to be able to defend your sites. Then you're going to need, and then we had that night where they all ran in at us with spears, right? So this is these people's version. It's not a textbook at the university. And by the way, did I tell you about my liberal arts degree? This is a real thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but some of the things that he documented, well, he's both a hero of Egyptology, and on the other end of it, there's a lot of things that are just, maybe he was just a bit of a kook when he talked about giants or any of these were common. I think this kind of thing was common knowledge before our time. If you look at many of the old texts and many of the old Egyptologists, including Petrie,
is this maybe like late 1800s, that kind of range?
That kind of range, even up until the 50s, you're finding. Your stuff. Honestly, honestly, a lot of, from the 50s to now, a lot of things have gone downhill quick. Now we're at guys getting in swimming pools, men going in girls' bathrooms. It's happening fast now.
What about, the relationship of this? This is something you hear a lot about, comes up a lot, the relationship between artifacts and the Smithsonian. A lot of times people reference, there's pictures of things and these were discovered, and the Smithsonian came in and swept them up and they're just gone. Not on display, nothing. Is that something you've dealt with much in your study of this pre-flood world?
Well, it does seem kind of like the junk stuff will end up, and this would also make sense, by the way, that a lot of the junk stuff winds up in the public museum, and that's kind of a walkthrough of here's what we would like you to believe, right? That's sort of what that is. The really nice stuff would end up in palaces of kings. This is what happened to Ron Wyatt a lot.
Okay.
And people were very critical of Ron Wyatt, and often because he couldn't re-show you something very often. And a lot of this had to do,
and Ron Wyatt's kind of famous for a lot of his work on the Noah's Ark, on the discovery of its current resting place. Is that right? That's kind of what I know him from.
He believed that the Noah's Ark resting place was the Drupanar site, and he may be right on that. I think that remains. There are people that will. Yes. So there's an entire formation out there. It's the right size of the boat. It looks like it's got. What would they be called? Not rivets, but I don't know why I lost my train of thought there. The big boards that would go down and make the boat up, the ribs of the boat, if you will.
Yeah, in our opening little clip we play at the beginning of each episode of this, that's one of the images we put in there is Ron Wyatt's site.
Drupanar site.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's there's a high probability of it. There's other guys that would like it. Yeah. I used to go back and forth a lot about that site. Answers in Genesis doesn't like it. Um, I don't know. It's the right size of the boat. There's not other formations like that out there. It's an imprint in the ground that has structure under. The arguments for it just keep getting stronger and stronger.
And you look at the technology. When was his primary? Was it in the 80s or 90s? You look at some of the like this show would have been hard to create in the 90s. Now you can get a mic like this at Guitar Center. We got this like everything's the technology he had. Then it's amazing what he was coming up with infrared stuff and some of the things he was doing.
Well, and a lot of people would simply state, how can a guy go and find all this stuff? And one of the answers to that is, well, he's one of the only people out there looking for it. Yeah. And he was going into so the sites now commonly thought to be Mount Sinai and the Split Rock. All of those came largely from Ron Wyatt or from sources where he heard this or that, and he went out there and he looked. And in the Saudi Arabian case, he and his son spent, I think, 3 or 4 months in the Saudi Arabian jail or prison. Wow. And they, think about the gravity of that. They wanted to go over and look at that Sinai site. Now, in the end, this brought a lot of attention to that particular site. There was an awful lot of stuff he found. In fact, in the Israeli Museum, some of the vases that they have come from Ron Wyatt. One of the little beads that they have come from a priest's outfit, or what's believed to have been one of the ephods, and one of the little jingles that they have on there that Ron Wyatt found. An angel carving that's pointing. You can almost call it the Ron Wyatt Museum.
Wow! Look at that shot that we have there. Have you been to this location?
Which one? Where is it at?
We'll bring that back up.
Drupanar site. No, I've never been to the Drupanar site. Now, who currently put together, and you might want to have him on your show at some point, because some of the footage that we got for the Exodus, I made arrangements with a man named Andrew Jones. He runs Discovered Media. The site that you're looking at there, Drupanar, it's inside, so it's just right a touch inside Turkey, right on the border of Iran. I guess I would describe it as fairly safe. I mean, there's you're pushing it a little.
You just described Chicago.
Well, now there's an argument that can be made. That would actually be the argument that Andrew Jones would make to you. So as long as you kind of follow the customs and stuff like that and don't buck around, I think you're going to be safe and have a good time.
Yeah.
But you are inside Turkey. That's better than Iran. You're, and it is a site. You're also over there by Ararat. So also right there by where you are, if you were at that site, you could visit the oldest winery that's in the world. But the guy that has put together the visitor center or redone the visitor center for that site would be Andrew Jones. And he's done an incredible job with that. And some of the footage that we got for this Exodus we're putting together. Let me tell you what I mean by that, because we had filmed quite a lot of Egypt at the sites that we wanted, except for a couple of tombs, one out there by where the Step Pyramid is, and one that I think is the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And they have all of these tombs you can go see except for that one guy. And I had called around, that tomb's been closed for nearly 10 years, David, the tomb that I wanted to get in. And on the walls, I can show you some stuff from it in a minute, but let me tell you this story. So on the, I called around, I've made agreements for footage with, for example, the Luxor Times.
Wow.
It would be nice if the Ark were in an ice cube on the mountain.
Yeah. Pristine, frozen, maybe half of it, the other half, Titanic style, kind of here or something, but still all, together, one piece, easy to put. What would that do to the world's narratives? Would it change anything if there was the full Ark there and you've got elephant poo-poo from back then and you got all this stuff, what would that do?
It would do something for me.
Because every culture has in its history a flood narrative. India,
Okay.
every I mean that would trace every people group in the world would celebrate the finding of the ark.
Let me kind of comment on that, because here's where, okay, so answers in Genesis, their position, for example, would be that the Drupal site is not good. I think they need to so a lot of their answers for that are outdated, particularly with some of the new finds and new scans of the site make it look substantial, and also because you had arguments between people at that time, they didn't get along, and so therefore your site's not good. And this happened a lot, particularly with Ron Wyatt. But here's what I would state about that site. It either needs to be confirmed or it needs to be alleviated. And I don't think that's happened yet. And the technology exists to very easily do that. It needs some more scans and it needs digging. And I mean, you got to dig down there and see it. Are you looking at parts of a boat, or are you looking at some kind of a formation, or are you looking at some kind of a man-made thing? And I would ask some, particularly at this point in history, that site either needs to be confirmed. This is the boat, and it's got a lot going for it to be that. It's the right size. It's in the right area. It came down a mudslide off of that mountain. Also, if you were on top of the mountain, which is where, it would be nicer if it were frozen in an ice cube, it'd be hard for the elephants and the squirrels and all that. I mean, they'd probably get down somehow, but it's probably going to rest there and kind of slide down, and they're going to get out, which is sort of what it looks like with that site. Rented these, or they bought these underwater drones. Yes, that's his. Some of those come from his stuff right there. They call that a tabletop formation.
Okay.
Now, what that means is, and he's the only one. So there's other people that have got claims, and there's other people that have, I saw something, and that includes Ron. So Ron had, I think I saw stuff under there. He did not have footage for it.
Okay.
Leonard Mueller took those claims and went out there and rented a boat, bought some big drones, and then he had problems with the Egyptian government, which is the same thing I'm telling you about the footage that I got out of that tomb. Because if you said, oh yeah, I think this is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and we just let us in there and we want to go film it.
Right.
There's stuff on those, there's water. So there's water imagery all around so as you enter that sarcophagus room, right in front of the sarcophagus, you have the god Ra coming up. He's riding on a snake, as he should be. And he's kind of in a protective oval, and you've got the spirit boats. You've got the spirit boats coming up and over on the top. And I'm going to walk you through what all these little symbols and stuff mean. And then on the bottom, you had this section. There's no other tomb like this. You've got water that goes all the way around the room, except for in this one section where the water's missing. It's parted right in front of that sarcophagus. Now, if you go up and you look at that water that surrounds the room, there's dead people floating in it. Now what's
really
written? Yes. Oh man, you're going to be impressed with this thing.
When does this come out? I got to see this movie.
Well, pretty soon. I almost have the Joseph when and I think it's the right timing. In fact, that's where we started that I didn't get to it. The flooding of the house and all of that. See, had I put that first one forth, I wouldn't have that footage from that tomb. I've got a guy that I believe that the Lord brought in, because I've tried to do CGI stuff before, and it's just, oftentimes I've had to just junk it because it just looks too silly. Because it's not just if you can pay somebody to do it, they've got to be good at doing it.
Right.
And the Lord brought a man in. The Lord's brought several men into my life that have been really incredible at doing stuff. And one of them is this man named Sid. He's up and he does, when he made the water parting scene, I said, did you make that? And he said, yeah, we're going to do the whole thing. And it's completed now. And when I looked at it, I said, it looks real. But we're also going to do that tomb, because there's some parts of that tomb.
So in this tomb, this is the one that you believe is the Pharaoh. It was a tomb to the Pharaoh that was alive at the time of Moses' departure from Egypt. The Pharaoh that sat during the plagues, the Pharaoh that went through the plagues and watched the Israelites leave.
It's the biggest, baddest pharaoh that ever lived, breathed, or walked on the face of Egypt. And it's the pharaoh that the Egyptologists call the Napoleon of all Egypt. It's the only dynasty of Egypt where they use the naming convention Moses. Moses is an Egyptian name, not a Hebrew name. It's not only that, it's the most religious pharaoh, and it's the pharaoh credited for compiling the Book of the Dead. So he would be going head to head. Now, he wasn't the author. The Book of the Dead is a compilation, but the most popular sections of the Book of the Dead, like the Wang of the Hearts.
I'm sorry, what's the Book of the Dead? You missed me. Lost you on that.
Well, okay, so the Book of the Dead, so all occult today comes largely from Egypt and Babylon, and the Book of the Dead is one of the major occult texts of that comes out of Egypt. So it's a long set of documents, of funerary texts. It's how they're going to go into it's their instructions for how they're going to talk to there's a lot of snakes and serpents in Egyptian beliefs. And you've got to talk to these things once you die, and you're going to go in and you got to bring your staff with you. And then this thing gets longer and longer. Some of the most popular occult sections come from this pharaoh. In fact, all occult today traces its power back to that man. And it's the same pharaoh that Manetho used for his dynasties of ancient Egypt. Manetho. So when the Greeks came in to put together Alexander the Great had wanted to gather all of the history of the world, and his underneath him, his four major generals would try to carry on some of his wishes. It was under Ptolemy that he would employ Manetho, who would do the Egyptica, which is how you get what today they call, when you go into museums, they're going to have the Egyptian history divvied up in dynasties. Manetho wrote those dynasties. Largely, they've remained unchanged. Your world history taught to you today in your university, right, is largely based on Egyptian history. That Egyptian history is based on the writings of Manetho. Manetho based his writings on the pharaoh whose tomb that Andrew went in and filmed. So if what I'm telling you is true, your world that they're telling you that the Exodus never occurred, and I'm straight up telling you that your world history in your textbook is actually given to you by the pharaoh of the Exodus. The underpinning of it. The most popular.
That's significant. That is so significant.
Well, and they know this too in Egypt, because they know generally what area, and they know there's waters on there and dead soldiers floating around the room. And the Christians are going to probably think this is the Pharaoh. And also so Weeks and Harris. So they did this book here, this James Weeks and Harris. They're one of the few guys that had permission, let me see here, permission to x-ray all of the pharaohs. And that was done a lot of years ago. They mainly focused on Tutankhamun, but they established that the body in that sarcophagus was a 20-year-old. And so this would mean that their opinion was this is not the body, this is not the pharaoh that's in there, which is critical because in Egyptian theology, you have to have a body, and oftentimes their whole staff would have to basically lay down their lives to go with them into the underworld. So it'd be preferable you've got the guy, but if not, we need some kind of a stand-in, which was their assertion. And most people don't know that, and I'm telling you guys, this is a subject I've wanted to do for a lot of years. Let me couch it in a soft way so I don't. Here's one of the ones where okay. So with the pyramids, if they were there before the flood, what you would think you would find is that the structure went down under the ground a lot more. And I don't know if it does or not. I've thought about that question before. Now the Sphinx tends to get covered up with sand if they don't clear it away, right? And it does have water damage on it. A lot of those have the sand damage side to side from the windstorms, but the Sphinx clearly has water damage in a vertical. And there's obviously they've redone its face. I think am I wrong in saying that even the Egyptians were kind of like it was already here? We just sort of they put their face on it. Is that right? it could have, it easily could have been with the Sphinx. It easily could have been, and there are arguments for the pyramids there is a very, it's one of these things you could go either way with. I will tell you this, David, that it is possible to build those. I do strongly believe, whether they're pre-flood objects or not, I do believe it's possible to build them. Let me give you an example. On the Great Pyramid, okay, so on the Great Pyramid, it's got this this king's hole in it that goes all the way up, that goes a long ways up inside this king's chamber, and it's a really big thing. And it's got, you can clearly see if you go inside of it that it was some kind of a pulley system, and they draw pulley systems a lot in Egypt. And so I don't know exactly how they built it, but I'm going to lay that one in your viewers' hands. The first time I saw the inside of that thing, my thought was they're bringing the rocks. See, if you bring the rocks up on a pulley system, you can build the pyramid in without a big ramp of dirt on the side. And that doesn't make me right, but if it were a pre-flood object, you would think it would go underground a lot more, but I don't know if it does. I don't know if it, I mean, you could have more. You remember the stone heads they have out there on whatever that island is?
Easter Island?
Easter Island, right. And they thought they were just heads, and then they discovered there's a lot more under there.
Yeah.
If that were the case with those pyramids, and you have ones in Mexico where it's covered with earth,
yeah, much bigger.
But it's clearly a pyramid. See, when you take a look at that, you say there's a real high probability that that came from a pre-flood world. Then you've got stones out there that look like giant snakes. You've got
there's a Easter Island head there,
right? That they've tunneled it out. So I don't, on that one, I don't know. I really don't know the answer to it. You could go either way, that they came across those and they were there. What Ken Haveen believed is that they came from the time of Adam. I've got to be honest with you, though. I sort of lean towards that they built them. When I go out there to Egypt and some of these other sites, and that's why I want to really impress the point that they could have built them, because the people coming right after the flood, and probably the people before the flood to a much higher degree, but you see all of these building projects that were at that time that you just simply, we don't do them today, but people did them as commonplace at that time. They moved enormous stones from here, there, and yonder.
How do you think they were moving them? They just had a batch of really great giants helping them? They're really big.
Well,
they have some kind of technology we don't possess, of like maybe using sound waves or something that could levitate things, or reverse magnetism, or some kind of, I don't know. I'm just making up stuff now, but.
Well, no, you could have that, but okay. So on that list of things, which are
what you got, and arguably it's like, well, they're there. That's not speculation. This, right. the how and when is but they're clearly there. Somehow these rocks came from a long way away to here. And how many are in the pyramid? The Great Pyramid's like, was it 1 million stones or 20 million stones or something? It was like some ridiculous number, and they're all like bigger than a ton.
So look at some of the drawings. Okay, so even out there by the Step Pyramid, they have this the Serapeum, which is all these burial chambers for cows. And look at some of the cows that they had at that time, and so all of the work animals there's all sorts of stuff in that ancient world, or in that time right after the flood, that we simply don't see cows. Some of these creatures don't even exist anymore. But many of the things that you're seeing, that you're finding in the fossil record, but that you're also that they're quite literally drawing, are enormous, Dave. And I don't know if that's the entire answer to it, but when you begin looking at the people and where they're giants, and you begin looking at the work animals, I mean, if you've got cows, what you see the bones for and what you see the drawings for, where that cow is way above you when you're standing up, man, that a few of those is going to pull some big rocks. I
That would help.
I don't know how they were doing it, um, but we do know that they were, and they were
Yeah.
doing it a lot. And directly following that flood, they were doing it all over the place. It's what all of the temples are like this, even stretching into the Americas.
Did the descendants of Noah, were they just really great builders? They got these great downloads from God as they built the ark, and Ham, Shem, and Japheth, and their kids just scattered and they would just kick butt at building.
Well, one would literally expect to find building projects like that coming through a family that could build that boat, and most of the building projects come through. So a lot of those first civilizations actually come through Ham. So you have Egypt, or Mitzrayim, which is going to birth Egypt, and then you have the sons of Cush that are going to ultimately birth Babylon.
Mm-hmm. You got Canaan. The 12 spies came back. Clearly, they were all in 100% agreement that they looked like grasshoppers compared to the people that lived there. That their grapes were giant. We've taken some great vacations. There's things I'll comment on. There's unbelievable stuff that I'll see and I, kind of forget about it. And I'll look at the picture later and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. But if you're going to come back and comment, or you bring back as a display the grapes, they must have been giant. And giant grapes would only be fitting for giant people.
Right. No,
this is a crazy land.
Well, yeah, no, there's something has to be different in the past to even put any of those structures together. And for many of the animals that you're seeing, particularly the ones that I think are pre-flood, some of these creatures couldn't even breathe today. And I don't know how large some of them got. There are a lot of things that people show me, and I don't know whether it's a real animal or how far to go with that. But even with the stuff that we all agree to is is coming out of the earth from the ancient world. There's no transitional fossils for it, so it's just there. Yeah. And these are giant creatures, and you can see that they're kind of diminishing over time. We're sort of the weaker, wimpier version of our ancestors in this place in every possible way. And that's clear on the skulls of the people. That's clear on the skulls, the artifacts of a great many of the animals, and that's definitely unimaginably true in the building structures. And so,
what would be your speculation on the kind of physical condition of somebody in a pre-flood world? And you got people that are living 500 years is nothing, 700 years, 800 years. Methuselah was 969 years old when he passes. So what kind of genetic predispositions would you have with that kind of longevity? What would you say would be, if we were to take a random guy from then, just one of Noah's cousins or somebody, whoever, back in that era, Methuselah, whoever, one of these guys in his prime, when he's only like maybe in his mid 500s, when he's still just peaking athletically, and put him in a modern day decathlon, would there be a difference in performance, heart rate, running ability, stamina, your ability to do like if you lived that long, what would the people like, in that time frame? Just regular humans, not a Nephilim genetic manipulation, but a pure blood human. Would they have been different than, Michael Phelps?
One would think so. We couldn't even, I'm not sure if we saw that world, we might be terrified of it. But even but on the issue of that biological stuff, that's kind of where our technology is headed to, right?
Yeah,
from the phones, we're kind of headed that direction, and then also the spiritual disposition of the people today doesn't look very different. So when you're reading some of these documents, that is what they're going toward. the praise of these fallen angels, these demons that are sacrificing to the demons as gods, that they're specifically in both Yasher and in Enoch. They're coming up with, they're performing abortions. This is important. For some reason, these are a consistent thing. And that, by the way, that doesn't matter whether one believed that we're a bogus text or not, because even if it is a bogus text, in the case of Enoch, you're looking at 300 years before Jesus, that it would have to be. So these are the themes and the mindset behind what's happening in the pre-flood world and what's happening today. So even if we're, kind of smaller, wimpier versions, I have a feeling of this, David, that whatever the technology you would be looking at that time, that it's sort of where we're trying to angle now, that it's kind of inherent to the biology. And if that's what they're wanting to kind of birth their way into existence, and this is sort of the angle we're going now, and it's all got a spiritual angle to it.
Yeah.
They're wanting to, it's as if every empire kind of adds another element. So you go from basically the Sumerians and the Assyrians to the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and then the Romans. And all of these are kind of a new addition to those teachings that you're finding in Enoch before the flood. So in the first one, so the Sumerians and the Assyrians, is we need to worship the demons again. That's really the core of the underpinning, right? We need to be talking, right? And then the next one. And so by Egypt, we're sort of making it into a religious practice, and by Babylon, you're solidifying it as a religious practice. And you're and then by the time of the Romans, you've got secret societies where if you're in the higher echelons, you're doing a more quality level of devil worshiping. And you've got all these forms of entertainment to keep the common man from thinking about anything but the Lord. And it's sort of this set of systems that were before that flood. They probably look different, but it's the same teachings that you're finding before the flood. And the Lord said that what they came in to do was to alter the world, to alter it.
Yeah.
But the Lord also said it was the wickedness of man that was the reason why. So it's kind of that grieved him in his heart. It was the wickedness of man. You got up there on the screen Genesis 6 and Enoch 6, and that. Did you go to that while you were in Israel? The out there to that area, the Pan's Cave?
No, I did not make it there.
Well,
I realized by the first day that we were in Israel, we told each other we're going to have to come back again soon because there's too much to see.
I actually hope to come and do it with you. Maybe we'll do that. And you know what? We've got the best years ahead.
Yeah.
So, but these are places where they really where you start from in the pagan world is the same place you end with in the pagan world. And you find a lot of serpent worship through the entire thing, which starts right there in Genesis. And so that
let's hit this from a second. Why is there this consistent thread in every civilization that they are drawn? They all went to that. That's throughout history, throughout Bible, throughout every arc. So many of these things tend to kind of repeat themselves, and then you look at the genetic manipulations of Genesis 6, and then you look at like Klaus Schwab talking about, we have a bunch of useless eaters that we're going to put on drugs, and they're going to play video games, just kind of keep them out of the way, and the elites and everybody that's functioning in society will have a chip in their head where we can communicate inside of a hive mind, and manipulate our own genes, and they ultimately want to live forever. Is that just the demonic, a bodiless being that wants a body to function in, and when they get one, they don't want to lose it, so they just kind of keep trying to live forever? Like these themes that they're talking about today in the open, very transparent, sound very similar to what's happened in the Babylonians all the way back to Genesis 6 and pre-flood times.
it's there has to be a spirit behind it, and I would even make it. I mean, there are guys in that crowd, by the way, man, that I really kind of like. I mean, they're I guess they're the bad guys, and we have to view them that way. But I'm telling you, this belief in evolution thing. So if they did see the underpinning of their belief structure. The underpinning of their belief structure is that it's a survival of the fittest. In the beginning, there was nothing, then nothing exploded. And so what they believe is that we've got to conserve the planet because, these people are just eating through everything. There is no God, and so therefore there is no consequence. And why are these other people there? They're really in our way. This is their train of thought, if I'm understanding them right. The problem is the underpinning of that belief structure, and it begins with that evolution. And then there's a spiritual source behind it, because back at the beginning, when you're looking at all of these little documents, starting in Sumer and Akkad, that there needs to be population reduction. We've got to control them.
Mm-hmm.
And then even after the flood, all of these concepts of interacting intimately, I'm being tasteful with the spirits, as much as one can press in. That's what that's what those sacrifices are fundamentally about, is a pressing into those spirits.
Okay.
And it has the same spirit behind it. Then they were openly talking about it then on all of their stones. This was the prize thing to do. This was the thing of Babylon. It was the thing of Sumer. This is what the kings do, man. And by the time you make it to the Romans, this presentation that you have on the screen of the Sumerian kings list. So I went through and I took that list, and I took that. I've got a little replica of the thing sitting right here. Not the greatest replica of it, but the text of that Sumerian kings list, it's my real strong opinion, and that it's telling you the Genesis story if you look at it in its section. So on section, let me see, lines 1 through 39 are your pre-flood world, and it clearly expresses this. It's not confusing. If you read through there, the translations, any one of the translations, the Sumerian kings list, you should come to roughly the same conclusion. So in this middle section here, I've got the families and the tribes after the flood. So that's what you've got. A lot of times, even with the dynasties of Egypt and Manetho's timelines, one of the things in these films that I've tried to do in a way that, well, in a good, understandable yet short and quick way, with a longer explanation on the website, is that a lot of what happens on texts like these is they're going to make lists of people that ruled. Now, what Manetho did and what your universities tend to do is make those back to back. So if I've got a whole list of people that ruled, they're thinking, okay, this guy ruled, then he died, then here comes the next one. But a lot of it isn't consecutive, it's concurrent. And if you're reading what they're stating, they're talking about this tribe over here, this rulership over here, this rulership over here. And in Egypt, it becomes obvious because you have upper and lower Egypt. So at any given time, you've got you've got a major pharaoh and all sorts of minor rulerships all throughout the land that are all being listed. So your dynasty that looked like this could actually be like this.
Okay.
On the Sumerian kings list, the lines 1 through whatever was up there are your tribes dispersing after the flood and after the Tower of Babel. And then after this, you're going to have the rise of Nimrod's empire. And it's all right in there. And the way you can tell that is that the descriptions of what they're telling you happened actually match only from the pagan side of it, where demons are good. They match with the same descriptions in Genesis. And these are powerful. See, these are...
That's fascinating.
Well, I don't even have to tell you it's true. You can, right? You can actually go through and you'll probably come to that same conclusion yourself
And
or
for those of you
close.
just listening, or if you're on the treadmill or whatever, you're not looking at the screen, you can text us at 40509, the word Trey, Trey. Text 40509, the word Trey, and you'll get an auto responding Dropbox link. We'll just give you all the slides, every graphic, everything we've got here, as well as we will notify you via that text when this documentary is released. And so you can watch Joseph immediately when it comes out. We'll notify you of that coming out, so you can be able to see the things that we're talking about. If you are in a place where you're not looking at the screen, you're driving, whatever, just send us a text, 40509, the word Trey, Trey. Okay.
Well, so those are my thoughts, David, are that these things that you and I believed growing up are real, or at least close to real. And I honestly hope that some of the people that it seems like are against us or fighting for a lot of this stuff. I'll tell you, Frank Brown, he believed the evolution. He believed all that stuff. When I went through that man's house, he had more copies of Michael Moore movies. You'd go to watch a
Really?
film. Yeah. Like, have you seen? Let me think of one to watch. Have you seen Fahrenheit 9/11? Oh, all right, Frank, put it on again. I don't know how
Wow.
many times we watched that thing with him. He loved Michael Moore. And but here's where here's where these things aren't just real, but they're demonstrable. I mean, largely one might believe this way or that in a different sects of Christianity, or even in the creation movement, or about different parts of the Exodus. But the track of it appears to be correct, and I think we're in hours of history where a lot more of this stuff not only can be found but will be, and
Wow.
that might even include the chariots of the Exodus. And I pray for protection on those things, because one of the things that happened to Ron White is he would go find stuff, and these people from these places, whoever they may be, will go get it, and they'll put it in the little palaces, and they'll probably destroy most of it while they're getting it. And then they'll put it in their place, and then some other one will come through later and bulldoze that one down, and you'll never find it again. So I pray for protection over that stuff, from the chariots of the Exodus to the all of it, the things that remain to be found.
Yeah.
And
Because boy, would that change the narrative if they found the Ark of the Covenant, or the Noah's Ark, or some of those things have the actual, people have arguments whether it's maybe that's in Ethiopia or here or there. It could be in there in Israel, but
yeah,
those things would play a major role if there's a discovery of something like that that's undeniable, and you look in there, it's like that kind of changes the conversation, or resets the table a little bit, or reshuffles the deck.
I you know. David, this is the story that saves some and destroys others. And I'll tell you, and I'm actually quoting Kim Clement on that line. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to believe something, it's not really going to matter what you show them. But for us, and I think there are going to be a lot of people change their hearts on the shows that you're doing, on all sorts of things. People change their hearts on all sorts of funny things. But I would like to find these artifacts for the joy of finding them.
Yeah.
I don't know what it'll do to the guy down the street. From my view, man, there's plenty enough evidence already. I mean, so if you say, here's the boat now, I don't know if that helps.
I don't think it changes the narrative for me at all of my belief in God. Here's my home base. My bullseye thing is God is real and God is good. And
Right.
and it's not connected to things are going good for me or not going good for me. God is good. And he's not only just barely good or a little bit good, he's absolutely good. He's 100% good. He's unquestionably good. And we are in a world with free choice and free will, and we're given that honor and that level of respect, made in his image. But You're going from there. I also know my grandparents were real. I don't question that at all. But if I were to find like an old wallet from my grandpa or a journal that I didn't know existed, and I would get to know, it doesn't make my grandparents any more real. But if I found a journal from my grandpa and I could kind of know him a little better, or man, he used to tell me a story about this thing, and now here's a picture of him at that. I'm like, it would kind of bring what I already know to life. I think it would be great to put that on the table,
And what you're reading in these stories, even in the Exodus, is a supernatural story, in some, in actually in a very real sense, and people have forgotten. See, back at the time of Petrie, back at the time of those guys, some of your greatest writers like John G. Lake and others, Wigglesworth, were at that time. And I think we're being told to go back and to take control. See, we've forgotten. See, the way that we got here, where there even are these people that are doing all the dark stuff all over the place, is because we forgot those things. And the Lord is the Lord is bringing it back. And so for me, I love the archaeological stuff. And you know what, David, next time you go to Israel, and I'll have a better background next time I talk to you, but I'll tell you, even with this one, the things we believed are real, and it's fun to walk through this process of seeing them. And the next time you go to Israel, I'd like to go with you, and we'll go explore some places we haven't seen before. And when this man Trump comes back in, there will be availability to go. I don't know if we'll find the things or not. We can certainly go look better than we can now.
Let's wrap up with this one last kind of question idea. You look at a commonality between Genesis, the book of Enoch. The characters seem very similar. The villain seems the same. It's kind of like you watch most all James Bond movies. There's kind of a similarity between most of the villains, right? There's a thread there. There's a lot of space in between. But if you're alive now, you can't help but feel like the ground beneath you is shaking, and there's like a volcano about to erupt, or whatever you want to say. If this was a movie and we were watching, you watch a movie sometimes, there's like three people, they're climbing, and you're like, oh, the guy's gonna die. You just got to tell the way the story's going. It's like, where there's like a really happy scene, and this, you're like, okay, the next scene, somebody's gonna get hit by a car. You got to tell like the narrative and the story, kind of how things are going. You can't help but know we're a place in the story that something has to break. Evil and has never been more transparent in playing their cards. They're holding their cards down. They're like showing you what they're trying to do now when it comes to evil in the world. You look at the narrative story, the evil villains there. You look at that, you kind of feel like there's the same villain, all the way through, where obviously it's a battle of good and evil. People that don't even have a language for God or the Bible or any of this stuff are aware, like, this is a spiritual war we're in now. This isn't just me against you. This isn't United States against Russia and these kind of narratives that were really easy in the Cold War. This is a spiritual time. Everything is very spiritual right now. And you can see that's what's behind. Like, you look at this book, that book didn't fall by itself. Something behind that book knocked it down. It was called My Hand. Like, there's things you're seeing around. You're like, that happened, but what was behind that? Everybody's looking for those things right now. Close us down right now with like your Trey Smith at 50,000 feet, looking at Genesis and the book of Enoch. God's telling a story. There's revelation. There's man. We're alive right now. My wife Stacy says every day, this is the best time ever to be alive, and she has many reasons for it. And if you make eye contact and even barely ask her, she'll tell you all of them. She loves to talk about why this is the best time to be alive and witness what God's doing. But walk us between those two bookends as we close here and kind of wrap it up. You're a storyteller. You're one of the most, I think, significant, important voices in documentary and education and filmmaking right now. But you're telling these stories Why are these stories so important to us right now? Why are they so
Well,
relevant, and what's happening?
well, okay, so all right, so the thing that comes to my mind most about right now okay, so what happens when you hit the Red Sea and the Pharaoh is so God kind of has this pattern of how he does things, whether it's in the pre-flood world with Noah or whether it's the Pharaoh coming through the canyon. And it gets to this moment that I think we're coming up on where the good guys, or the quote unquote good guys, are like, how do we lose, right? And God's kind of silent a minute, and it's in that minute where the sides kind of make themselves visible. It says they were actually picking up stones to stone Moses, and they were considering, going back to Pharaoh and saying, he talked us into this. And on the other end of it, the Pharaoh believes he's about to win. They're right in the clutches, right? And by any natural cause, Pharaoh should have won.
Yeah.
And by any natural cause, the good guys, Moses and the Israelites, they should have lost. And God actually wants, and the whole process with those plagues. So the plagues is really a process in a way that Pharaoh understands, because each plague is one of his gods. So the same thing here in what we're going through I'm learning stuff. All the bad guys, all of these things that, oh my gosh, is that deep and that dark and that. So you're walking through the process of going all the way to that water. And the natural thing for the bad guys should have won, but it won't. And God wants you to see that at the end. He doesn't want there to be any misunderstanding, and he does this all the time. And he also does the thing at the Red Sea where you're there and it looks like you're going to lose. And he's like, okay, maybe he's not answering for him. He does this a lot. In fact, he has a real sense for the dramatic.
That's a great way to put that.
I would state that he doesn't do it sometimes. He does it like every time. See, and you can really expect that to be coming with this situation we're in. It will have a moment where all the people with Trump and all that are going to be like, did we really just lose? And the bad guys are going to be like, I got you. We built our AI thing quicker or whatever. And
Jesus on the cross. I mean, the devil had to have been like, yes,
right.
He didn't know he's like unleashing the worst thing that could ever happen for his plans.
Right. It's always this is probably the most consistent theme, and that he's silent for a minute. That God is kind of silent for a minute before those waters open up. And I think that's where we're at. And I think the choreographer on both sides really is the Lord. So I don't know whose plan is what, but
just in a way, like the guy on the phone call you're talking about earlier didn't intend for that to be heard. He's having a meltdown. He doesn't know he's being exposed. It's like, that's the time we're in right now. And you might pretend like I think this, but it's like the truth is coming out on all fronts for, again, mega church pastors or policemen and trash men. It doesn't matter. It's just sort of coming out. And makes it a very interesting time to be alive. Not a boring day, never.
Well, I tell you what, David, that I just, it's an honor, man. And you're right about that. To me, it looks choreographed. To me, it's beginning to look like we're close to the head of something that is, I think is probably going to be, the way the things that I look at tend to read is that it's going to look scary. But we're going to win on the other side of it. I think it has to go there. I think it has to go there for people to wake up. See, it's collections of people that believe these things that actually make all of these bad guys that you see, it makes them possible. So I call them the Randys. So you've got these whole collections of people that believe things that really create the problem. And for those people to wake up, it's got to get pretty dark. They're zombies, man. So,
Well, this is a season of waking up for sure. Our slogan on the Flyover Conservative Show, when we do our regular show over here in just like the regular normal world, not my deep dive conspiracy conversation, David's fun time show. Our slogan is wake up, speak up, and show up. And, I think we're in a season for people are waking up, in unprecedented numbers. And Trey, I think if you're rolling that, as they wake up, people are going to be like, well, hey, excuse me, Rumpelstiltskin or whatever over here. What happened? What is going on? And I think that's why people like yourself are alive right now, or Sean Hibbler, or Matt and Joy Thayer, documentary makers, made the documentary The Trump I Know. And there's the Fluvid-19 documentary with Sean Hibbler. There's so many people doing great work right now, helping to make sense of crazy things. And a picture's worth 1,000 words, so I don't know how much one of your films is worth, but more than that. And you're going to be a really important voice, not just right now and with what's coming out of these next few months, but you're going to be a really important voice next year and the year after that and the year after that, because we're going to be in a phase where people are going to need to learn what's happened, what's going on. And there's something really special about great storytellers and you using your craft to be able to do it and teach at the same time. So for Flyover family listening, you can text us again at 40509, the word Trey. And there is a lot of images we didn't even get to today that we're going to include in that Dropbox link. And the moment that we have intel on this documentary coming out, there'll be a trailer here shortly that'll come to you. And then the documentary will be out in June. You'll get first bat at it. So text 40509, the word Trey, and it'll come right out to you. And again, go to godinanutshell.com. You'll be glad you did. It's a site that's evolving, changing, getting better every day. There's always new stuff on there. Incredible content, the old stuff, the new stuff, and then most importantly, even the stuff that Trey hasn't even made yet, because his mind's always creating. You heard him tonight on the show. There's 2 or 3 times he thought of new ideas. He's like, I should make a film about that. I should make a film about that. So there is more oak trees inside of him in the form of little seeds than you can imagine. So go godinanutshell.com and just dig away. You'll be glad you did and really enjoy it.